The first time Karen took my utility keys, I thought it was a prank. Then the streetlights died, 3 garages trapped people inside, and she stood in the middle of the road waving my keyring like a trophy. She smiled at me and shouted, loud enough for half the block to hear, that she was securing dangerous access points for the community. I realized 2 things at once: she had no idea what she'd grabbed, and the entire neighborhood was about to pay for her confidence. It started on a Tuesday that should have been boring. Clear sky, normal traffic, nothing in the air but that winter dust and the faint smell of someone grilling too early. I was on my way out to check a meter cabinet near the corner, the one the city uses to access the utility corridor under our street. My job wasn't mysterious, I wasn't some secret agent, I was the guy everyone called when their gate keypad glitched or the streetlight near their driveway kept flickering like a horror movie. I did maintenance contracts, small repairs, and occasional emergency work for property owners. The city had issued me keys for specific panels and utility enclosures because I'd been vetted and licensed for certain access tasks. They weren't magic keys, they were responsibility. The HOA didn't like responsibility unless it wore a blazer and carried a clipboard. Our HOA president, Karen, had been elected in one of those sleepy meetings where 10 people show up, 5 of them confused, and 3 of them just want the pool to open on time. Karen was the opposite of sleepy. She ran the board like it was a courtroom drama, and she was both judge and hero. Every problem she treated like a personal attack that needed a public victory. She didn't just knock on doors, she arrived. She didn't ask questions, she issued notices. She didn't make suggestions, she announced policy, effective immediately. And she hated my keys. I kept them on a heavy metal ring with a bright orange tag that said City Access Authorized. Not because I liked attention, but because when you're in a hurry, you don't want to grab your house keys and accidentally walk toward a live cabinet. I'd learned that the hard way once and spent an entire afternoon apologizing to a very tired utility supervisor who treated safety protocols like sacred scripture. That morning, I was coming back from my truck with a tool bag in one hand and a clipboard in the other, headed toward the sidewalk where the utility cabinet sat behind a small metal fence. I heard heels. Not footsteps. Heels. Rapid, impatient, clicking like a countdown. "Excuse me," Karen called, and it came with a tone like she was already disappointed with my answer. I turned and there she was, sunglasses on even though the sun wasn't that bright, blazer tight, hair immaculate, and a stack of papers held against her chest like she was protecting national secrets. Behind her, 2 board members hovered, their faces the blank expression of people who regretted volunteering. "What can I do for you?" I asked, polite, neutral, like you do when you're about to deal with a storm. She pointed at my belt where the keyring hung. "Those keys. Are you authorized to have those?" I almost laughed because it was so absurd. Like she'd just asked me if I was authorized to have shoes. "Yes," I said. "They're mine. City issued." Karen's mouth did that tight smile thing, the one that suggests she's enjoying the moment where she's about to catch you in something. "The HOA has jurisdiction over this community," she said, as if reading from a script she'd rehearsed in front of a mirror. "We need to ensure no one is accessing restricted infrastructure without board oversight." I glanced at her papers. I recognized one of the forms. It was a printed copy of our HOA bylaws, highlighted like a college student cramming before a test. She'd probably spent the night with a highlighter and a belief in her own authority. "These are city utility cabinets," I said. "Not HOA property. They are located on HOA-managed land," she snapped. "Therefore they fall under HOA security protocol. There have been incidents." "What incidents?" She lifted her chin. "I don't have to disclose that. But we will be taking possession of those keys for safekeeping." I actually paused, because I wasn't sure I'd heard her correctly. Taking possession. Like I was a kid with scissors. "No," I said, calm. "Absolutely not. Those are tied to my license and my contract. If something goes wrong, I'm accountable. Karen stepped closer. She smelled like expensive perfume and bad decisions. If you refuse, she said, the board will consider this noncompliance. We can fine you for violating community policy. I stared at her for a second, weighing whether this was worth the time. The rational part of me wanted to walk away, call the city contact, and let them deal with her. The human part of me, the part that had dealt with Karen's kind before, knew she would take any retreat as victory. These keys don't belong to you, I said. And the HOA cannot confiscate city-issued access tools. Her smile widened as if I'd just given her the line she wanted. So you admit you have access to restricted utilities, she said loudly, turning her head like she wanted an audience. Thank you. That's all I needed. Before I could respond, one of the board members, a guy named Devin who looked like he hadn't slept since 2019, reached out as if to calm her. Karen, maybe we should just... She waved him off. Then, in a move so bold it was almost athletic, she snatched the keyring right off my belt. It happened fast, metal ring sliding free, keys clinking, the orange tag flashing. For a half-second, my brain didn't compute it. Like watching someone steal your shoes while you're wearing them. Did you just take my keys? I asked, voice low. Karen held them up and shook them. The sound made my stomach drop. These will be held by the HOA, she declared. You can request access through proper channels. I took a step toward her. Give them back. Right now. She stepped back and lifted her phone like a weapon. Touch me and I will call the police, she snapped, and her voice carried across the street. I stopped. Not because I was scared of the police, but because I knew exactly how this story would look from the outside. A man reaching for keys in a woman's hand, her phone up, her face full of outrage. Karen lived for that framing. She didn't just want power, she wanted a scene. I took a breath. Karen, I said, those keys include the emergency bypass for the utility corridor panel. If there's an outage or someone gets trapped, those keys are needed. Karen laughed. A sharp little laugh that was half amusement, half insult. Oh please. You're being dramatic. I stared at her. Dramatic. Coming from the woman who printed bylaws like they were sacred scrolls. Fine, I said. Keep them. But I'm documenting this. I'm calling the city supervisor and my contract manager. Karen's smile faltered for the first time. It was subtle, but it was there. She didn't like the idea that her little performance might reach someone who wasn't impressed by her HOA title. You do that, she said, regaining her tone. The HOA welcomes oversight. We have nothing to hide. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, the keys dangling from her hand like she'd won a prize. I stood there for a moment, heat rising in my chest. Not anger exactly. More like that cold awareness you get when you see a car drifting into your lane and you know the crash is coming. Karen didn't understand what she'd done. Worse, she didn't want to understand. She'd made herself the hero of a story where I was the villain, and she was going to act out the rest no matter what reality said. I pulled out my phone and called the city utility supervisor first. He picked up on the second ring. This is Marco, he said, voice already tired. Marco, it's me, I said. I need to report something immediately. HOA president just confiscated my city access keys. There was a long pause, the kind where you can hear someone silently counting to 10. She did what? He said slowly. I'm not exaggerating, I said. She physically took them. I told her they're city-issued. She thinks HOA has jurisdiction. His exhale sounded like a man who'd been dealing with humanity for too long. Where are you right now? On site, I said. Main Street, near the utility cabinet by the corner. Don't touch that cabinet, he said. Don't do anything. I'm calling the inspector. This is a security issue. An inspector? I repeated. Yes, he said. And I'm documenting this. Those keys are controlled access. If they're in unauthorized hands, the city has to treat it like a breach. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means, Marco said, If she tries to open anything, or if the city believes access is compromised, they will shut down and secure the area until they verify the system integrity. I looked down the street where Karen had disappeared behind a row of parked cars and manicured hedges. She's not smart enough to open anything, I muttered. You'd be surprised, Marco said, and the way he said it made me feel worse. I hung up and stood by my truck, watching, listening. The neighborhood had that quiet hum of normal life. Garage doors opening, someone's dog barking, distant lawn equipment. It felt wrong that everything looked fine when a fuse had already been lit. 10 minutes later, Karen reappeared like she'd been waiting for the perfect dramatic timing. She had more people with her now. A small parade. One of them was a security guard the HOA occasionally hired for events, a bored-looking guy in a reflective vest. Karen was talking loudly, gesturing with the keys. I'm telling you, she said, it's a liability. These access points are a danger to residents. We will be installing additional locks. My heart dropped. Additional locks. That was the magic phrase that turned a bad situation into a disaster. I walked toward them, keeping my voice steady. Karen, I called, loud enough that everyone heard. Do not install locks on city utility cabinet. That's illegal and dangerous. She spun toward me, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, smile sharp. There he is, she announced to the group. The unauthorized access person who thinks he's above community law. I almost admired the confidence. Almost. Give me my keys, I said. She lifted them again like she was showing proof. Not until you submit a request form and the board approves, she said. We need accountability. I pointed at the orange tag. That is the accountability. The city knows I have them. They do not know you have them. Right now, you are the problem. Her smile widened. Threatening me in public, she said. Interesting. A couple residents shifted uncomfortably. One woman, older, holding groceries, looked confused. Karen, she said, why do you have his keys? Karen turned to her like she was addressing a child. Because we're protecting the neighborhood, she said. Some people don't respect rules. I took a breath and tried a different approach. Karen, I said, quieter, the city is sending an inspector. This is now a security breach. If they believe the access is compromised, they can shut down services to secure the area. That includes streetlights, garage access systems, and any shared power point. Please hand them back before you make this worse. The word inspector did something to the crowd. People stiffened. Someone murmured, City inspector? Karen's jaw tightened for the first time. For a split second, I saw doubt. Then she did what she always did when reality threatened her narrative. She doubled down. Good, she said. Let them come. I will explain how I caught unauthorized activity and took action. The city will thank me. Behind her, the security guard shifted his weight like he wanted to be anywhere else. Devin, the tired board member, looked like he might faint. You didn't catch anything, I said. You stole my keys. Karen's voice rose. I confiscated them under HOA authority. Right then, as if the universe wanted to underline my point, the streetlights along the main road flickered. Not because it was dark, but because they were on an automatic system tied to a power stability sensor. They flickered once, twice, then shut off completely. People looked up. A man in a driveway cursed under his breath because his garage door stopped halfway, then froze. Someone else tried their keypad gate. It beeped, then went dead. A few seconds later, I heard a shout from down the street. Hey, my elevator's stuck. Someone yelled from inside a townhouse building that had a small shared lift. Karen froze, the keys still in her hand. Her mouth opened slightly. I looked at her and spoke slowly, so she couldn't twist my words. Karen, I said, this is exactly what I warned you about. She swallowed and forced a laugh that sounded like it hurt. Coincidence, she said, but her voice wasn't as strong now. Then, from the far end of the block, I saw a white city vehicle turn into our street, The kind with official markings and a light bar that wasn't quite police but definitely wasn't friendly. It rolled forward with the calm confidence of people who were used to being obeyed. Karen lifted her chin again, trying to recover her crown. "Perfect," she said loudly. "The inspector is here. Everyone will see I was right." The city vehicle stopped near the utility cabinet. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out wearing a reflective jacket and carrying a hard case. He didn't look at Karen like she was important. He looked at the cabinet like it was a crime scene. He glanced at me first, then at the small crowd, then his eyes landed on the keys in Karen's hand. His face didn't change much, but his voice came out flat and sharp. "Who is holding the city access keys?" Karen stepped forward like she'd been waiting for applause. "I am," she said. "HOA president. I confiscated them for community safety." The inspector stared at her for a long beat, then spoke in a tone that made the air feel colder. "Ma'am," he said, "you just triggered a municipal security protocol. Hand them to me immediately, and nobody on this block touches anything until I say so." The inspector didn't raise his voice, and somehow that made it worse. Karen hesitated just long enough to convince herself she still had leverage, then slowly handed the keys over like she was surrendering evidence in a courtroom drama she thought she was winning. The metal clink echoed down the quiet street, and every neighbor suddenly understood that whatever this was, it wasn't an HOA meeting anymore. The inspector clipped the keys to his belt without ceremony and turned to me. "You," he said, already knowing the answer. "Name, license number." I gave it to him. He nodded once, then turned back to Karen. "You," he said, "step back behind the curb." Karen blinked. "Excuse me. This area is now under temporary city control," he said, calm and relentless. "That includes the sidewalk, the cabinets, and the access corridor beneath this block. Step back." She opened her mouth, probably to remind him of her title, but something in his posture stopped her. She retreated half a step, then another, heels scraping against concrete. The crowd followed instinctively, like a tide pulling away from something dangerous. The inspector opened his hard case and pulled out a tablet, tapping rapidly. "We detected an unauthorized possession of controlled access tools," he said, not looking up. "Protocol requires us to verify integrity. Until then, all automated systems connected to the corridor remain offline." A man near the garages raised his hand like this was a town hall. "How long is that going to take?" The inspector finally looked up, eyes scanning the block. "As long as it takes." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Garage doors were stuck. Security gates were dead. Street lights were off in broad daylight, which somehow made everything feel wrong. Someone tried their car remote again, clicking it repeatedly like persistence might fix the problem. Karen recovered just enough to step forward again. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're punishing residents because I took responsible action." The inspector turned to her slowly. "You confiscated city property without authorization," he said. "That's not responsible. That's a breach." "I was protecting the community," she insisted. "He was accessing utilities without HOA oversight." The inspector glanced at me. "Were you accessing anything at the time?" "No," I said. "I was heading to a scheduled meter inspection." She stopped me before I even reached the cabinet. He nodded again, then looked back at Karen. "Then you interfered with authorized work and compromised access control." Karen crossed her arms. "The HOA has the right." "No," he cut in, and his voice sharpened for the first time. "The HOA does not. City infrastructure is not subject to HOA jurisdiction. Ever." That word hung in the air. Ever. It wasn't negotiable. It wasn't up for interpretation. A couple people in the crowd actually exhaled like they'd been holding their breath. Karen's cheeks flushed. "You can't just shut down an entire block," she said. "People live here." "Yes," he said. "Which is why this protocol exists. To prevent unqualified individuals from causing harm." She laughed, brittle and defensive. Harm. I took keys. I didn't blow anything up. He met her gaze. You don't know what those keys access. That's the point. I watched her confidence crack, just slightly. Not enough to stop, but enough to make her dangerous. Karen wasn't the type to retreat when she was wrong. She was the type to look for someone else to blame. She pointed at me. This is his fault, she said loudly. If he hadn't been sneaking around with restricted keys. I wasn't sneaking, I said. You took them off my belt in public. That's your version, she snapped. The inspector raised a hand. Enough. I don't care about your versions. I care about restoring safe access. He turned to the crowd. If anyone is stuck in a garage or elevator, signal now. A man near the townhouse waved both arms. My wife is stuck between floors. The inspector nodded and spoke into his radio. Confirm secondary response. We have a trapped occupant. Karen's eyes widened. An elevator? That's not even connected to. It is, he said. Through shared power stabilization. Which you would know if you were authorized. That shut her up for about 3 seconds. She leaned toward one of the board members, whispering furiously. I caught fragments. Overreaction. Lawsuit. Liability. The words bounced off the reality forming around her. The inspector handed me a pair of gloves. You're staying, he said. You know the layout. You do not touch anything unless I say so. I nodded. Understood. Karen snapped her head toward us. Why does he get to stay? Because, the inspector said, he's qualified. That one word landed harder than any insult. Qualified. Karen had built her entire identity around authority, and now a stranger in a reflective jacket had stripped it away with a single syllable. A city van rolled in behind the first vehicle. Then another. People started filming. Phones came out, lenses pointed. Karen noticed and straightened her blazer, lifting her chin like she was about to be interviewed. This is being handled, she announced to no one in particular. The HOA will cooperate fully. The inspector ignored her and crouched near the cabinet, scanning seals and lock points. No visible tampering, he muttered. Keys returned intact. He looked up at Karen again. Did you attempt to open any panels? No, she said quickly. Too quickly. He studied her. Did you try? She hesitated. Just a fraction. I considered checking for hazards. My stomach sank. Karen, I said quietly, tell him the truth. She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. I did nothing wrong. The inspector stood. Ma'am, he said, if you inserted those keys into any lock, even briefly, you must disclose it now. Silence. A woman near the curb whispered, Oh no. Karen's lips pressed together. I tested one, she said finally. To see if it opened. That's all. The inspector closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his expression was no longer neutral. That cabinet controls the emergency override for multiple systems, he said. Testing it without authorization triggers a full integrity review. What does that mean? Someone asked. It means, he said, this block stays offline until we can confirm no damage or misalignment occurred. A man cursed loudly. Another woman asked if she could leave for work. Someone else demanded to know who was paying for this. Karen raised her voice again. This is outrageous. You can't hold us hostage over a simple mistake. The inspector turned to her, and this time his tone was ice. You are not a victim here. You are the cause. The crowd shifted. That sentence changed something. People stopped looking at the inspector like an inconvenience and started looking at Karen like a problem. A neighbor stepped forward. Karen, he said, why didn't you just give the keys back? She spun on him. Because I was enforcing rules. What rules? Another voice called. You don't own the utilities. Karen's composure wobbled. The HOA bylaws don't cover city law, the inspector said. And I suggest you stop interfering. She opened her mouth again, but this time Devin grabbed her arm. Karen, He whispered urgently, please. Just stop. She shook him off. No, she snapped. I will not be silenced for doing my job. The inspector spoke into his radio again. Requesting administrative follow-up. Possible unauthorized interference by HOA official. Administrative follow-up. That phrase hit Karen like a slap. She looked at him. What does that mean? It means, he said, this won't end today. Her confidence cracked wider now. You're overstepping. No, he said. You did. Another city vehicle pulled up. This one had different markings. Legal. Compliance. Words that made Karen's jaw tighten. I felt a strange mix of vindication and dread. I hadn't wanted this. I'd wanted my keys back and my day to continue. But Karen had turned a Tuesday into a spectacle, and the city didn't do half measures. The inspector finally turned to the crowd. We're initiating a full corridor inspection. Temporary shutdown will continue. We'll prioritize trapped occupants and safety-critical systems first. Groans rose. Anger bubbled. And slowly, inevitably, that anger began to focus. People turned toward Karen. She noticed. Don't look at me, she said sharply. This is the city's choice. A man pointed at her. You took the keys. She laughed brittle again. I was protecting you. By trapping my wife in an elevator, someone shouted. Karen's face flushed deep red. That's not my fault. The inspector stepped between her and the crowd. Ma'am, he said, for your own safety, I suggest you step away. She hesitated, then scoffed. Fine. She took a few steps back, but the damage was done. Her authority had evaporated, replaced by suspicion and anger. Phones were recording. Whispers were spreading. I stood there, watching the fallout ripple outward, realizing this was no longer about keys. Karen had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And the city, unlike the HOA, did not issue warnings lightly. This was just the beginning. By the time the fire department arrived to free the woman stuck in the elevator, the mood on the block had shifted from confusion to quiet fury. The kind that doesn't explode right away, just simmers while people replay events in their heads and start connecting dots. Karen stood off to the side near the security guard, arms folded so tightly her knuckles were white, watching everything with the stiff smile of someone refusing to accept that the story had turned against her. The inspector didn't waste time. He coordinated with the firefighters, verified isolation points, and supervised the manual override like this was a routine drill. That alone told me how serious the situation was. When professionals stop acting surprised, it usually means they've seen worse, and that's never comforting. When the elevator doors finally opened and the trapped woman stepped out, shaken but unharmed, the block let out a collective breath. Her husband hugged her so tightly I thought he might crack a rib. Then he turned, eyes blazing, and looked straight at Karen. This is on you, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen scoffed. Absolutely not. The city chose to. You chose to grab things you don't understand, he snapped. You chose to play cop. She bristled. Watch your tone. No, another neighbor said. You watch yours. That was new. People didn't usually talk back to Karen. They complained in private, rolled their eyes, whispered at barbecues. But now they were saying it out loud, and once that starts, it's hard to stop. The inspector finished documenting the elevator incident and walked toward Karen again. I need your full name and identification, he said. Karen stiffened. Why? Because you admitted to inserting a city key into a controlled lock without authorization, he replied. That's interference. I'm the HOA president, she said, like that was a shield. And I don't care, he said evenly. A few people snorted. Karen's eyes darted around, noticing for the first time that no one was nodding along anymore. She dug into her purse and handed over her ID with a sharp movement. This is harassment, she said. The HOA will be filing complaints. The inspector took the ID, scanned it, and handed it back. You're welcome to file whatever you like. This report goes to city compliance, utilities, and legal. Legal, she repeated, voice tight. Yes, he said. Legal. That word landed harder than inspector. Karen had always operated in the gray space where people didn't want trouble. HOA fines, warning letters, petty threats. Legal meant rules written by people who didn't care about her authority or her tone. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. A message from Marco. Inspector escalating. Compliance looped in. Stay available. I slipped the phone away and looked back at Karen. She was arguing with Devin again, whispering urgently, gesturing at the inspector, at me, at the crowd. You should have backed me, she hissed. Devin looked exhausted. Karen, you crossed a line. No, I enforced policy. You stole keys, he said quietly. She recoiled like he'd slapped her. You're supposed to be on my side. I'm supposed to protect the HOA, he replied. And right now, you're burning it down. She turned away from him, jaw clenched, and scanned the street. Cameras everywhere. People recording. Neighbors whispering. Her control was slipping, and she knew it. That's when she made her next mistake. She marched toward the inspector again, voice rising. You are overreacting. If anyone caused this shutdown, it's him, she said, pointing straight at me. He brought those keys into the community. The inspector didn't even look at me. He was authorized to. You don't know that. Yes, I do, he said. I verified it before I arrived. Karen blinked. You what? The moment your call came in, he said, we pulled his credentials. He's been cleared for limited access for years. No violations. Her mouth opened, then closed. She turned to me, eyes flashing. You didn't tell me that. I did, I said. You didn't listen. That's irrelevant, she snapped. The HOA has to know who's doing what. And now the city knows what you did, the inspector said. A city compliance officer arrived next, stepping out of a sedan with a clipboard and a look that suggested she had zero patience for theatrics. She listened to the inspector's summary, asked a few pointed questions, and then turned to Karen. Are you aware, she asked, that interfering with city infrastructure can carry civil penalties? Karen scoffed. This is a misunderstanding. The officer didn't smile. Misunderstandings don't usually involve confiscating keys. The crowd leaned in. You could feel it. This was no longer background noise. This was the main event. The compliance officer continued. Because this occurred within an HOA-managed area, we'll also be reviewing whether the association has established unauthorized control policies over municipal systems. Karen froze. The HOA isn't responsible for this. You are its president, the officer said. Your actions reflect on it. That did it. Karen's composure shattered. This is absurd, she shouted. I volunteer my time for this community. I protect these people. And now I'm being attacked because some contractor wants special treatment. People started talking over her. You trapped my wife. You shut down my garage. You never listen. You act like you own the place. She raised her hands, trying to regain control. Everyone calm down. No, someone said. You calm down. The compliance officer raised her voice just enough to cut through the noise. This is not a public forum. This is an active compliance situation. Karen turned to her, face flushed. You can't silence residents. I can, the officer said, and I will. The inspector stepped back toward me. We're expanding the inspection scope, he said quietly. She admitted to testing the lock. We have to assume potential misalignment across the corridor. How long? I asked. Hours, he said. Maybe longer. I exhaled slowly. People are going to lose it. They already are, he said. Karen overheard that and snapped toward us. How long is this going to take? She demanded. As long as it takes, the inspector repeated. That's unacceptable, she said. I demand you restore service immediately. The compliance officer looked at her like she was looking at a child reaching for a hot stove. You don't get to demand anything right now. Karen laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You think this ends well for you? The officer's expression didn't change. I know it ends documented. That shut Karen up. For the next hour, the block existed in a strange, suspended state. Crews moved in and out. Inspectors checked seals. Firefighters packed up. Residents paced, complained, filmed, argued. Every conversation eventually circled back to Karen. She tried damage control, approached small groups, lowered her voice, explained how she was only trying to help. It didn't work. People had seen too much. I watched her from a distance, feeling something close to pity, then reminding myself that she had done this to herself. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd sprinted past it, waving my keys like a flag. Eventually, the inspector gathered everyone's attention again. We've completed preliminary checks, he said. No permanent damage detected. However, due to unauthorized access, we are filing a full incident report. Karen perked up. So you'll turn everything back on? Yes, he said. But not before compliance finishes. Her smile returned, weak but hopeful. And after that, this is over. The compliance officer shook her head slightly. No, she said. After that, this begins. Karen stared at her. What do you mean? It means, the officer said, we'll be reviewing HOA practices, authority over utilities, and potential violations. Karen's confidence finally collapsed. You can't do that. We already are, the officer replied. I watched Karen stand there, silent, surrounded by the consequences she'd tried so hard to avoid. The keys were no longer in her hand. Her authority was gone. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely afraid. And I knew, without a doubt, that this was far from over. The block came back to life in stages, not all at once, like a patient waking up after surgery. Streetlights blinked on even though the sun was still up. Garage doors groaned and finished their interrupted journeys. The elevator hummed back into motion, cautiously at first, like it didn't trust the situation either. People tested things twice, sometimes 3 times, before they believed it was real. Karen stood near the curb, watching the systems come back online as if that alone proved her innocence. She straightened her blazer and turned toward a small cluster of residents, ready to reclaim the narrative. You see, she said, forcing a smile, everything's fine. The city confirmed there was no damage. No one clapped. No one nodded. A man leaned against his car and said, They confirmed you caused it. Her smile tightened. That's your interpretation. It's literally what they said, someone else replied. Karen inhaled sharply and walked away from them, heels clicking like punctuation marks at the end of her patience. She headed straight for the compliance officer, who was still conferring with the inspector and typing notes into her tablet. I want this on record, Karen said loudly, that the HOA acted in good faith. The officer didn't look up. It is on record, she said. Along with everything else. Karen waited, arms crossed. And I expect a copy of any report that mentions my name. You'll receive notice if required by law, the officer replied. Karen's eyes narrowed. That's not an answer. It is, the officer said. I watched Karen's jaw tighten, the muscle twitching as she calculated her next move. When intimidation failed, she usually pivoted to procedure. Paperwork, meetings, committees, the slow grind that exhausted people into compliance. She turned toward me instead. This isn't over, she said quietly, close enough that only I could hear. I know, I replied. The city made that clear. Her eyes flicked to the inspector, then back to me. You embarrassed me. You did that yourself. She leaned in. You think you won. I think you took keys that weren't yours, I said. And now the consequences are catching up. She scoffed. Consequences for you too. The HOA doesn't forget. I almost laughed. Neither does the city. That hit a nerve. She straightened and walked off, phone already pressed to her ear. I didn't have to hear the conversation to know what it was about. Emergency board meeting. Legal counsel. Spin control. By evening, the block looked normal again, but nothing felt the same. Neighbors lingered outside longer than usual, trading stories, replaying moments. Karen's name came up in every conversation. Not as a leader, but as a liability. I got a call from Marco just after sunset. Compliance flagged this as high priority, he said. They're pulling HOA documents tomorrow. What kind of documents? I asked. Policies, communications, any instance where the HOA claimed authority over utilities or access, he said. They want to see if this was a one-time stunt or a pattern. I thought back over the years. The notices Karen had sent. The signs she'd posted. The times she'd demanded keys, access, control. It's a pattern, I said. That's what we're expecting, Marco replied. Be ready. You may be asked to provide statements. I will, I said. The next morning, Karen struck back. I woke up to 3 emails from the HOA, all marked urgent. The first accused me of violating community safety protocols. The second demanded I cease all utility-related activity within HOA boundaries pending review. The third announced a special board meeting to address unauthorized infrastructure access. She was trying to flip the script. I forwarded everything to Marco and the compliance officer. The response came back fast. Do not engage. Let her dig. By noon, city vehicles were back. This time they didn't park discreetly. They lined the street like punctuation marks of authority. Inspectors, compliance officers, 2 people from legal, clipboards out, cameras rolling. Karen emerged from her house like she'd been waiting, phone in hand, smile fixed. Good afternoon, she said brightly. I assume this is about clarifying procedures. One of the legal reps glanced at her. It's about reviewing authority. Karen gestured toward the clubhouse. We can meet inside. No, the rep said. We'll start here. They began with the utility cabinet. Photos, measurements, seal checks. Then they moved to signage Karen had installed over the years. Unauthorized warnings, threatening language, claims of HOA control over access points that were never hers to control. Residents gathered again, quieter this time, watching the autopsy of Karen's authority. The compliance officer turned to Karen. Who approved these signs? I did, Karen said. As president. Do you have written authorization from the city? No, Karen said, annoyed. Why would I? The officer nodded and made a note. They asked for emails next. Karen hesitated. Those are internal communications. Not when they involve municipal systems, the legal rep said. Her confidence cracked again. I'll need to consult counsel. You're welcome to, he said. We'll be issuing a preservation notice. That phrase landed like a brick. Preservation notice meant she couldn't delete anything. Couldn't edit. Couldn't clean house. I watched her process that in real time. Her phone lowered slowly. Her smile vanished. By mid-afternoon, the inspectors had enough. They gathered near the utility cabinet where this whole mess had started. Effective immediately, the compliance officer announced, the HOA is prohibited from interfering with, restricting, or regulating access to city infrastructure. Any further attempts will result in penalties. Karen opened her mouth to object, and, the officer continued, due to the actions of the HOA president, we are referring this matter for further administrative review. Karen's voice came out strained. You can't punish the entire HOA for one person. We're not, the officer said. We're investigating it. The legal rep stepped forward. Ms. Karen, he said, you are advised to refrain from acting on behalf of the HOA regarding utilities until this review concludes. She stared at him. You're suspending me. We're restricting your scope, he corrected. There's a difference. To Karen there wasn't. She laughed, high and brittle. This is harassment. No, he said calmly. This is accountability. That night, the HOA group chat exploded. Messages flew. Screenshots circulated. People demanded explanations. Some demanded resignation. Karen posted a long message about being targeted, misunderstood, betrayed. It didn't land. By morning, the board called an emergency vote. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from 3 different neighbors before noon. Karen argued. She cried. She accused. She threatened lawsuits. The board voted to temporarily remove her from decision-making authority pending investigation. When she stormed out of the meeting, someone filmed it. The video spread fast. Karen, red-faced, yelling about conspiracies and corruption, storming past neighbors who no longer looked away. I stood on my porch and watched her drive off, tires squealing slightly as she took the corner too fast. For the first time since I'd moved there, the block felt quiet. Not because nothing was happening, but because something had finally stopped. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen didn't know how to lose quietly. Karen disappeared for 3 days, and the neighborhood relaxed in a way it hadn't in years. Not the loud kind of relief, not celebration, just a subtle easing of tension. People waved more. Conversations lasted longer. No one glanced over their shoulder before complaining. It was like a constant background noise had finally been turned down. Then she came back louder than ever. I was loading equipment into my truck when I saw her car pull up, shiny and spotless like it had been detailed for battle. She stepped out wearing a different blazer, darker, sharper, and sunglasses big enough to hide whatever expression she didn't want anyone to see. She didn't come alone. 2 men followed her out, both in suits, both carrying folders. Lawyers. I leaned against the truck and watched. If Karen was going to make a scene, I might as well be comfortable. She marched straight toward the clubhouse where a small group of board members had gathered. People started drifting closer, pretending to check mail or walk dogs. No one wanted to miss this. "I'm calling this meeting to order," Karen announced, voice projecting like she was back on her throne. Devin stepped forward. "Karen, you don't have authority right now." She smiled thinly. "That's a temporary misunderstanding." One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "We are here on behalf of Ms. Karen to address procedural violations by the HOA and the city." A few neighbors exchanged looks. Procedural violations. That was Karen's favorite phrase. It sounded official without meaning much. The compliance officer wasn't there this time. But the city hadn't left the block unguarded either. A white vehicle idled at the end of the street, quiet but present. Karen launched into a speech about overreach, about volunteer leadership, about how she'd been unfairly targeted for taking initiative. She painted herself as a protector punished for caring too much. It was almost impressive, the way she could reshape reality to suit her need. It didn't work. Devin spoke next, voice shaking but steady. "You took city keys without authorization. You admitted it. You caused a shutdown. That's not initiative." Karen scoffed. "That's your opinion." One of the lawyers stepped in. "The HOA bylaws grant the president broad authority to act in the community's interest. Not over city infrastructure," someone called out. Karen snapped her head toward the voice. "Stay out of this." "No," the woman replied. "You dragged all of us into it." Murmurs of agreement spread. Karen's jaw clenched. She hadn't expected resistance from the crowd. She was used to boardrooms, not public accountability. Then she turned and saw me. Her smile sharpened. "There he is," she said, pointing. "The contractor who started this whole mess." I pushed off the truck and walked closer. "You started it when you took my keys." "You provoked me," she shot back. "You refused to comply with HOA oversight." "There is no HOA oversight over city utilities," I said. One of the lawyers raised a hand. "Let's keep this civil." Karen ignored him. "He's been operating unchecked for years. The city blindly trusts him." A door opened behind us. 2 city officials stepped out of the idling vehicle, having clearly decided it was time to intervene. One of them was the compliance officer from before. The other I didn't recognize. The crowd went silent. "This is not a private HOA matter," the compliance officer said, approaching. "And this meeting is not authorized." Karen's face flushed. You again. Yes, the officer said. And we're here because you violated the scope restrictions placed on you. I'm speaking as a resident, Karen said quickly. No, the officer replied. You are acting as HOA president. Karen laughed. You can't stop me from talking. No, the officer said. But we can stop you from acting. She turned to the lawyers. Do something. The second city official spoke for the first time. Ms. Karen, this is a formal notice. Any further interference with city operations or misrepresentation of authority will result in penalties. Karen's voice rose. You're threatening me. We're informing you, he said. She turned back to the crowd, desperation creeping into her tone. Do you see this? This is government intimidation. No one responded. One of the board members quietly stepped forward. Karen, she said, please leave. Karen stared at her. You're siding with them. I'm siding with reality, the woman replied. That was the moment something snapped. Karen pointed at me again, shaking with rage. This is your fault. You think you're untouchable because you have city friends. I took a breath. I think you crossed lines you don't understand. She laughed, wild and high. You think this ends here? The compliance officer stepped closer. It doesn't, she said. But not the way you think. She handed Karen a sealed envelope. Karen hesitated, then tore it open. Her eyes scanned the page. The color drained from her face. What is this? She whispered. A notice of administrative review, the officer said. Including potential fines and personal liability. Karen's hands shook. You can't hold me personally responsible. You acted personally, the officer replied. The lawyers leaned in, reading over her shoulder. One of them frowned. The other whispered something I couldn't hear. Karen looked up, eyes blazing, then crumpling. This is harassment, she said weakly. No, the officer said. This is consequences. Karen folded the letter slowly, like it might bite her. She looked around, searching for support, for outrage, for someone to rally behind her. There was none. She turned abruptly and walked to her car, lawyers scrambling after her. She slammed the door and sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. Then she sped off again, this time without squealing tires. The crowd dispersed slowly, conversations hushed, thoughtful. I stood by my truck, watching the space she'd left behind. Karen had come back swinging, convinced she could outmaneuver the fallout. Instead, she'd walked straight into it. And I had the uneasy feeling that if this was Chapter 5, the real damage hadn't even started yet. The letter didn't just follow Karen out of the neighborhood, it followed her back in. You could feel it in the air the next morning, like pressure before a storm. City cars were gone, the block looked normal again, but the sense of watching something unravel hadn't faded. People checked their phones more often. Conversations lowered when they mentioned her name. Then the notices started. Not from the HOA. From the city. They came taped to doors, tucked into mailboxes, and emailed directly to residents. Plain language. No drama. Just facts. There had been an incident involving unauthorized interference with municipal infrastructure. An administrative review was underway. Residents were not at fault. Cooperation might be requested. That last line did more damage than anything else. People realized this wasn't about keys anymore. It was about records, patterns, and whether Karen had been freelancing authority for years without anyone stopping her. I got my request that afternoon. A formal statement. Timeline. Any prior interactions with Karen involving access, utilities, or demands for control. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote for 2 hours. Every time she'd demanded copies of keys. Every time she'd insisted on approving work she had no authority over. Every notice she'd posted implying HOA ownership of city systems. I attached photos I'd taken over the years, things I'd never thought mattered. Signs. Emails. Texts. When I hit send, I felt something like relief, followed immediately by dread. That same evening, Karen knocked on my door. I didn't open it right away. I watched through the side window. She wasn't wearing a blazer this time. No sunglasses. Just a tight jaw and eyes that looked too bright. She knocked again, harder. "I know you're home," she said. I opened the door but didn't step outside. "What do you want?" She inhaled sharply, like she'd practiced this speech. "You gave statements." "Yes." "You're trying to destroy me." "No," I said. "I told the truth." She laughed hollow. "You think that matters. They're building a case, and you're helping." "You built it yourself," I replied. Her eyes flicked inside my house, scanning like she was looking for leverage. "You don't understand what's happening." "I understand exactly," I said. "The city doesn't like people pretending to be them." She leaned closer. "You could stop this." I raised an eyebrow. "How?" "Clarify," she said. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding. That you didn't explain properly." I shook my head. I explained. "You didn't listen." Her voice dropped. "You owe me." I actually laughed then. "For what?" "For not reporting you before," she snapped. "For letting you work here." I stared at her. "I don't work for you." She flinched, like that sentence hurt more than anything else. "This neighborhood will turn on you," she said. "They always need a villain." "I'm not the one who trapped someone in an elevator," I replied. Her face hardened. "You're enjoying this." "I'm surviving it," I said. She straightened, mask snapping back into place. "Fine," she said. "I tried." She turned to leave, then paused. "You should know," she added without looking back, "they're looking at personal liability." "I know," I said. "That's why I told the truth." She walked away, shoulders stiff, heels striking the pavement like punctuation again. This time it sounded different. Desperate. 2 days later, the city inspection widened. They didn't just review utilities. They reviewed contracts, HOA expenditures, security hires. Any time Karen had used HOA funds to interfere with or monitor city infrastructure. It was worse than anyone expected. Security guards paid to observe utility work. Locksmith invoices for locks that were never authorized. Emails instructing board members to deny access until HOA approval was granted. People started asking questions they'd never asked before. Why had the HOA budget ballooned? Why were fines so aggressive? Why did Karen always need keys? The board fractured. One member resigned outright. Another released emails to residents to clear her name. Devin stopped answering Karen's calls entirely. Karen responded the only way she knew how. She escalated. She filed a complaint against me with the city, accusing me of misconduct, harassment, and unauthorized disclosure of HOA communications. It landed on Marco's desk and was dismissed in under an hour. Then she filed one against the compliance officer. That one didn't go anywhere either. What did go somewhere was the city's next move. A formal notice was issued naming Karen individually. Unauthorized interference. Misrepresentation of authority. Obstruction of city operations. Civil penalties pending. When that notice circulated, the mood shifted again. This time from anger to fear. Not of the city. Of Karen. People realized how close they'd come to being collateral damage in her crusade. How many shortcuts she'd taken. How much risk she'd been willing to impose without telling anyone. Karen stopped knocking on doors. Stopped posting messages. Stopped attending anything public. Then the sheriff's office showed up. Not lights and sirens. Just 2 deputies in plain vehicles, knocking on Karen's door while half the block pretended not to watch through blinds and cracked doors. They stayed for 40 minutes. When they left, Karen didn't come out. That night, my phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. "You ruined my life." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "No. You did." I blocked the number and set the phone face down on the table. Outside, the street was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes after something breaks completely. And I knew that whatever Karen was planning next, it wouldn't be loud. It would be desperate. The desperate phase didn't look dramatic at first. No yelling. No public speeches. No lawyers marching through the block. It looked like silence. The kind that pretends to be resignation but is really just planning. For nearly a week, Karen stayed out of sight. Her car didn't move. Her lights stayed off. Even the neighbors who lived closest to her said they hadn't seen her take out trash or collect mail. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought she'd finally understood that this was over. She hadn't. It started with an email blast sent just before midnight. The subject line read, "Community Emergency Notice." My phone lit up with messages within seconds. People forwarding it, asking what it meant, asking if it was real. I opened it slowly, already feeling the tension coil in my chest. Karen had sent it from the official HOA address. She claimed the city investigation had been resolved internally. She claimed the shutdown had been caused by contractor error. She warned residents that unauthorized contractors posed an ongoing safety risk. She announced new temporary rules restricting all utility access until further notice. And she named me. Not directly, but close enough that there was no confusion. A previously trusted contractor, whose actions had triggered unnecessary municipal response. She ended the message by instructing residents to report any sightings of unauthorized utility activity directly to her. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Then again. She wasn't loud anymore. She was lying. Within minutes, Marco called. "Do not respond," he said immediately. "We've seen it." "She used the HOA account," I said. "Yes," he replied. "Which is a problem. A big one." The compliance officer looped in next. Her message was shorter. She just made it worse. By morning, city vehicles were back. Not inspectors this time. Legal. Compliance. And one unmarked car that stayed a little farther back, engine running. Residents gathered again, but the mood was different now. No curiosity. No confusion. Just anger. Karen finally came out when they knocked. She looked smaller somehow. Tired. But her eyes were sharp, scanning, calculating. The compliance officer didn't waste time. "You sent an unauthorized communication misrepresenting an active investigation," she said. "After being explicitly restricted from acting in this capacity." Karen crossed her arms. "I was informing residents." "You were obstructing," the officer said. Karen laughed weakly. "You can't stop me from speaking." "No," the officer replied. "But you can't impersonate authority." The legal rep stepped forward. "Ms. Karen, this constitutes misrepresentation, retaliation, and potential witness intimidation." That word landed hard. Intimidation. Karen's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "I never threatened anyone. You encouraged residents to report a named individual during an active investigation," the rep said. "That qualifies." Karen's gaze flicked to me, then away. "He deserves scrutiny." "He is a witness," the rep said. "And you know that." The unmarked car door opened. 2 investigators stepped out. Not uniforms. Plain clothes. Badges clipped discreetly. The kind of people who don't raise their voices because they don't have to. One of them addressed Karen directly. "We need you to come with us." Her face drained of color. "For what?" "To answer questions," he said. "Voluntarily." "And if I don't?" she asked. He didn't smile. "Then we return with paperwork." The crowd was silent. Phones were up, but no one was whispering now. Everyone understood what they were watching. Karen looked around, searching for support. For outrage. For someone to step forward and say this was unfair. No one did. Devin stood near the back, arms folded, eyes fixed on the ground. A woman Karen had fined repeatedly shook her head slowly. The man whose wife had been trapped in the elevator didn't look away at all. Karen swallowed. "I want my lawyer." "You can call them," the investigator said. "From the station." "Station." Karen's shoulders sagged just slightly, then stiffened. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and nodded once. "Fine." As she walked toward the car, she stopped in front of me. "This isn't justice," she said quietly. This is revenge. I met her gaze. No, I said. This is what happens when no one stops you. Her eyes flickered. Not anger this time. Fear. She got into the car. The door closed. The engine started. And just like that, the person who had ruled the neighborhood for years was gone. The city stayed all day. They secured HOA accounts, revoked access, issued formal notices to the remaining board members. The compliance officer addressed the residents directly, explaining the next step. Interim management, oversight, transparency. For the first time, everything was clear. That evening, the HOA website went offline. When it came back up, Karen's name was gone. So was her email. So was every rule she'd invented. The block felt lighter. Not celebratory. Just relieved. I stood on my porch as the sun set, watching neighbors talk without looking over their shoulders, watching kids ride bikes without being told they were violating something. I thought it was over. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. Unknown number. I played it. Her voice was low, controlled, almost calm. You think you won. You think they took everything. But you forgot something. I stood there, listening to the silence that followed, feeling the old tension creep back into my chest. Karen wasn't finished. And whatever she thought she still had, she believed it was enough to hurt someone on the way down. Karen's message sat in my voicemail like a bad smell you couldn't air out. I replayed it once more, not because I wanted to hear her voice again, but because I needed to understand what she thought she still controlled. She had lost the HOA. Lost her authority. Lost the crowd. Lost the city's patience. There weren't many pieces left on the board. That realization came faster than I expected. The next morning, a city legal courier knocked on my door with a thick envelope and an apologetic look. "You're listed as a primary witness," she said. "We wanted to make sure you received this directly." Inside was a notice summarizing the final findings of the administrative review. It wasn't written for drama. It didn't need to be. Karen had been formally charged with unauthorized interference with municipal infrastructure, misrepresentation of authority, obstruction of city operations, and retaliatory misuse of HOA communications. Civil penalties were assessed. Heavy ones. Fines stacked on fines, each tied to documented actions. The city also named her personally liable for costs associated with the shutdown, emergency response, and investigative hours. But the line that made me sit down was near the end. Referral for criminal review due to pattern of conduct and false statement. That was what she'd forgotten. The city didn't just shut things down. It followed through. By noon, everyone knew. Not because of gossip, but because the city held a public briefing in the clubhouse parking lot. Compliance officers explained the outcome calmly. Clearly. Without Karen's spin. They confirmed the HOA would be placed under temporary external management. They confirmed residents would not bear financial responsibility for the fines. They confirmed Karen was permanently barred from acting in any HOA or city-adjacent leadership role. And then they answered questions. People asked about the signs, about the locks, about the fines they'd paid over the years. The city listened, took notes, and explained what could be reviewed and potentially reimbursed. Karen's legacy unraveled sentence by sentence. She tried one last move that afternoon. From a new email address, she sent a message to several residents claiming the city was lying and that she'd been silenced for exposing corruption. She attached screenshots, partial emails, out-of-context messages. It lasted less than an hour. The compliance officer forwarded the email to everyone with a single line attached. "This communication has been added to the case file." That was it. The sheriff's office returned that evening, this time with paperwork. They didn't stay long. They didn't need to. Karen wasn't arrested in a dramatic scene. She was served. Formally. Quietly. The kind of moment that doesn't feel cinematic until later, when you realize how final it was. She moved out 3 weeks later. No announcement. No goodbye. A moving truck early in the morning. A few boxes. No neighbors watching openly, but everyone noticed. When the truck pulled away, no one waved. The house went on the market not long after. The listing was careful with words. Motivated seller. Quick close preferred. I never heard from her again. The block changed slowly, then all at once. The interim HOA management removed half the old rules within a month. Fines were reviewed. Some refunded. Meetings became boring in the best way. People disagreed without fear. Nobody waved clipboards like weapons. The utility cabinets stayed exactly where they were. Untouched. Quiet. Doing their jobs without drama. One evening, months later, I ran into Marco while he was checking a site nearby. He leaned against his truck and nodded toward the street. "Quiet now," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "It is." He paused. "You did the right thing." "I just told the truth," I said. "That's usually enough," he replied. "Eventually." As for the keys, the city reissued them. Same ring. Same orange tag. City access authorized. Clipped them back onto my belt the first day I returned to work on the block. No one questioned it. No one stared. A couple neighbors nodded in passing. That was all the validation I needed. Sometimes I think about Karen and wonder if she ever understood where it went wrong. If there was a moment, maybe standing in the street with my keys in her hand, when she could have stopped and chosen differently. But then I remember her smile when she took them. The certainty. The belief that rules were something she controlled, not something that applied to her. And I realize she didn't lose because of bad luck. She lost because the city doesn't care who you think you are. It only cares what you actually did.